we're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bringing news just for you. It's Wednesday, August 19th here in Seoul. I'm Lee Soo-jin, and this is News Generation. Joining us today is Fabio.
Happy Wednesday, everyone.
Happy Wednesday, and also Hanyu is with us today.
Thank you for having me today.
To have you, and both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. So it's the middle of the week, and with summer in full swing, the heat isn't the only thing making us sweat. The humidity and that unmistakable summer smell can push everyone's patience to the limit. And while we can't control the weather, there are definitely some summer habits that can make the heat feel even more unbearable. When we're already hot and sticky, even small things that we might normally overlook can suddenly become major pet peeves. So, Fabio, what's one thing that really makes you lose your patience during the summer? What are your summer pet peeves?
Only one? There's a few things, Soo-jin. But for me, it has to be the lack of personal space on public transportation.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Every day I experience it, and especially during rush hour, it gets quite intense. And I can understand why people cannot wait for the next train or the next bus. But sometimes that inevitably means that you have to end up having that physical contact with other people, which is not the best part of it. And during this hot weather, it just gets quite uncomfortable. Perhaps I'm just not particularly happy about the intimacy that comes with being pressed against each other, especially when it's a stranger that also doesn't have that particular consent to that situation.
Agreed. I think anything that feels mildly annoying when it's cold feels extremely annoying. Like for me, waiting
when
in
it's
line.
Hot.
Exactly. Waiting in line at restaurants becomes even harder, I feel like. What about you, Hayo? What are your pet peeves?
Well, actually, we talked about this topic recently, and honestly, it's been so hot and humid here in Korea lately. So one thing that's really uncomfortable is when I go somewhere and the air conditioning is set too high. The summer in Korea is not just hot, but also very humid, right? So even when the temperature goes up just a little, it can feel much hotter and even more humid. So I think that really makes the discomfort level go up too.
Right. So now it's time for our weekly debate, where we take a closer look at the issues sparking debate and hear both sides of their argument. And today we're tackling a particularly heated topic, whether going shirtless in public is simply a way to beat the heat, or a form of exposure that makes others uncomfortable. So what sparked the recent debate over shirtless runners along the Han River here in Korea, Fabio?
Well, recently the weather has been extremely hot, as we all know, and people have been finding different ways to cope with it. One fairly obvious solution is to remove the clothes that in this weather can feel like an additional layer of suffering. And the controversy, however, comes from the fact that some men have recently taken that principle rather further. So what they have been doing is just taking off their shirts completely while walking or running along the Han River. And I'm sure it feels considerably more refreshing from their perspective. And of course, some people see it as a perfectly reasonable response to the heat, but others seem to regard it as an unnecessary invasion to the public eye. And either way, it has generated quite a big debate online. And I think that we have more than enough material for a similar discussion today in this program.
Right, which is really exciting. So I think that's what makes this issue so interesting. It's not simply about staying cool, but about where we draw a line between personal freedom and also public comfort. So when it comes to public spaces, should staying comfortable take priority, or should we also consider how our choices affect the people around us? So our panelists have their OX paddles ready right here to show us where they stand on this particular issue. So the question for both of you today is, do you think going shirtless in public is acceptable, yes or no? So what are your takes on this?
I'll say,
So Fabio said yes, and Hayu said no. So Fabio, you want to go first?
I guess for me, it has to do with my cultural background too. Coming from a country like Spain, to me, it seems like a matter of personal freedom. It just seems very normal to me. Obviously, you're not allowed to be shirtless anywhere, like a supermarket or a local business, for example. But if it's simply on the street, I find it to be quite natural, and I'm pretty understanding about it. So not everyone might particularly enjoy this side, but if it's simply a way of cooling yourself down, I wouldn't necessarily ban the practice altogether. There is, of course, a time and a place for absolutely everything. And I think that this popular opinion on whether people should do it or not also has to do a lot with the body that is being exposed. So conventionally attractive bodies sometimes get the free pass, while other types of bodies may not be that well accepted. But when we talk about location, I think the Han River strikes as one of the most reasonable places to do it inside, for example, the city of Seoul. And when you exercise outdoors, taking off your clothes can genuinely help with that release of temperature and just like regulating everything. Sometimes, I mean, a little bit scandalous, but sometimes I wear tank tops. It's not the biggest thing, no, I know, but sometimes I just wear shirts on top of it, but then I take the shirt off because it allows me to feel the breeze and it lets me cool down, even though I feel a little bit uncomfortable showing that much skin. But I can also understand why Korea, you know, may not be that used to that body exposure, and it just makes a whole controversial thing out of it.
Now, I like how you pointed out how it really depends on type of body some people have.
Exactly.
Because with some people, it might look more, I guess, scandalous, for example, than other people. So it's really, it's a balance.
Because even when you brought the topic, I feel like I include myself, most people might have imagined a specific type of body running around, but that is not necessarily the norm. And I think that opinions do differ depending on what we're seeing, which is not necessarily something good, but we should really think about it and really, you know, realize how our moral code sometimes is attached to our societal perceptions and societal expectations too.
Right. So you said you had a different opinion on this. So can you tell us more about that?
Yes, I think this became such a big issue because quite a lot of people find it uncomfortable or sometimes even awkward. So in Korea, we generally don't show much skin in public compared to Western countries. We're still relatively conservative about this, I think. And unless you're in a public setting like a swimming pool, you actually usually don't see people taking their shirts off in public.
That is true.
Right? And these days, actually, people even tend to wear rashgas when they go swimming. So actually, there's less skin exposure. And personally, I prefer that too. So I understand that it's hot, but taking your shirt off in a public place just because of the heat can make other people feel uncomfortable.
I think for me it would depend on what kind of public space it is. I think for me, like if it's like where everyone's running and exercising, it makes more sense. Like you mentioned, wearing tank tops or like some of the clothes that you typically show more skin is kind of reasonable because you are sweating. So you get that. But I guess if it's like like streets. Like
you need that type of Korean nunchi, right? That type of like societal perception of like knowing time and place and whether it's going to make other people uncomfortable or not.
Yeah.
I think the one that is taken off the shirt should also have that type of responsibility.
Right, exactly. That's a good point. So as you can see, there is a clear divide between respecting individual freedom and respecting shared social norms and also the cultural aspects that come with this. And this divide is reflected not only in our panel, but also in the opinions of our viewers, as we will soon see. So we asked on our Arirang News YouTube channel, what do you think about joggers going shirtless in public spaces? And here's what the results showed. So the majority here, 62%, said they have no problem with it at all, while 38% said it makes them quite uncomfortable. So looking at the results, I would say that's a pretty clear majority in favor of letting joggers go shirtless, but with more than a third of viewers still feeling a bit comfortable, it seems this debate is far from settled. And the debate doesn't stop at just shirtless joggers. So swimwear itself, so I kind of mentioned that about rash guards and also swimwear here in Korea. So this has also sparked controversy over where it's appropriate to wear it. So where should people draw the line when wearing swimwear outside the beach? So Hae, what are your thoughts on this?
There's also been a lot of debate online about how much you can go in public wearing a swimsuit during the summer. And in particular, there have been quite a few discussions about Haeundae in Busan, which the beach is right in the middle of the city center. And so you have the beach, but right next to it, you also have cafes, restaurants, and stores, and also everyday businesses there. And recently, there was even a story about someone tried to enter a cafe near Haeundae, but was asked to wait outside because of what she was wearing. And I think that's what makes the issue harder to define. You're technically still in a beach area, but at the same time, there are also places where people work and go about their everyday lives.
I mean, we just saw like a picture that kind of depicted what the story you told us. And I do feel like she is showing a bit more skin than we normally see at cafes and restaurants. So, I mean, this question becomes especially complicated in places where the beach and everyday life exist side by side, such as places like Haeundae and Busan. So once again, our panelists are going to bring out their OX paddles to show us where they stand on this. So the question I have is it okay to enter businesses near the beach in swimwear, yes or no? So what are your answers for this? So,
Well,
actually, so you're on the fence of this
Yeah.
for Fabio, and you're pretty set on saying yeah.
Yes.
So can you tell us about that?
Yes, of course. So if I were a resident of Haeundae, I think I could understand it to some extent because it's a unique area, like, sorry, where the beach is right next to all these shops and businesses as well. And a swimsuit is still a type of clothing, I think. So it's not like you're completely naked. So maybe we could be a little more accepting of it, just like we don't find it strange to see people wearing swimsuits at a resort.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
And in fact, even some large supermarkets in Haeundae, they often have customers coming in wearing swimsuits, even though some of them are about a 20-minute walk from the beach.
Oh, okay. So you're on the fence about this. So tell
Yes,
us why.
because I mean, I'm still in the Western mindset right now. I'm not thinking about Korean swimsuits. I'm thinking about Western swimsuits.
Okay.
So mostly bikinis or shirtless men. And so
Right,
I
that's
think it
true.
really depends on the type of cafe or restaurant we are talking about. For example, in Spain, we have the concept of chiringuitos, which are this type of bars or restaurants that are on top of the sand right
I
next to the
see.
beach.
Okay.
So that is the perfect space and the perfect spot to do so.
Right.
However, if you go to a chain cafe that is just across the street from the beach, even if it's still very close by, you know, just ordering a matcha latte in a bikini doesn't feel reasonable. So when it comes to an ordinary commercial area, a swimsuit is still a very revealing piece of clothing. And although I generally support the freedom to wear whatever you want, I think there's a time and place for everyone, for absolutely everything. And even in European countries, even though we have been talking about how exposure is a little bit more welcome on this Western cultures, you often find that supermarkets and other businesses near the beach have these signs that say that you cannot enter
That's
without
quite
a shirt.
surprising that you can see
Yes.
that in European countries.
Exactly, or without, if you enter without a bikini, you might not be, you know, it might be, they might ban the entrance basically. We have other examples, for example, in the French resort destination of Corsica, for example, walking around the streets in a bikini or a swimsuit is actually prohibited. And in Sorrento, Italy, you can even be fined for walking around in a swimsuit outside of a designated area. So you might be surprised to see how these countries where exposure is pretty welcome also have these restrictions.
I think, thank you for pointing that out because I feel like a lot of people might think because Korea is just typically seen as a very conservative country, but
Right.
I guess it's not just a cultural thing anymore. It's
It
more
exists
of a,
pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, it's more about the TPO, like you said. So on one hand, there's the idea that swimwear belongs at the beach, but on the other, Haeundae is a unique environment where the beach is literally part of the neighborhood, and that certainly makes the boundaries a little blurrier. So we also wanted to hear directly from our viewers. So we ran a poll on our YouTube channel asking, what do you think about entering businesses near the beach in swimwear? So the majority, when we took a look at the results, showed that 73% said it's okay, while 27% said it makes them uncomfortable. So that's a more decisive result, with nearly 3 out of 4 viewers being comfortable with it. However, still over a quarter of participants still felt uncomfortable with the idea, which raises the question of where we draw the line between where the beach ends and everyday public space begins. So the debate over what's appropriate in public doesn't end at swimwear. One of summer's biggest festivals right here in Korea is called the Waterbomb Festival. And this has also sparked a lot of controversy over how much exposure is too much. So our panelists will bring our OX paddles one last time to weigh in on this particular issue. So do revealing outfits and suggestive performances go too far at the Waterbomb Festival, yes or no? What are your thoughts
far?
on this? So
Really?
you say no, they do not, and how you said they do. So tell us about this.
Yeah, actually last month there was a lot of buzz around the revealing outfits and provocative performances by both male and female artists at Waterbomb. And since performing at Waterbomb actually can really boost an artist's popularity. So there are concerns that it's leading to more like competition over how much artists have to reveal and increasingly more provocative performances. And the thing is, the photos and videos from the festival actually spread very quickly on social media. So even though it's an event intended for adults, young children can still like come across that content online very easily, right? So what I want to say is like, that's why some people feel that performances that are too sexual or provocative can be inappropriate.
Right, and this is I feel like the one of the few, I guess, performances or music festivals where artists are expected to come out in swimsuits, but I guess yeah, it has become quite controversial because people have been pushing in line because it has gone. These videos do go viral because it's so rare to see artists do that. So yeah, so what are
I
your
actually
thoughts?
really see that point because now I understand how maybe artists can also feel pressure to just go through that trend just to get that type of exposure. But at the same time, those videos circulate around the internet and anyone can see them.
Right.
But when I was thinking about it, after all, it is just an adults-only festival. And I'm sure that is not necessarily a great moral emergency right now. I even suspect that the freedom that comes with that exposure is actually part of the reasons why people go to the festival itself. They kind of want to experience that atmosphere. And you could essentially think of it as just like a cool pool party for adults.
Right.
But Waterbomb may seem certainly provocative by Korean standards. But if you look at other festivals, especially summer festivals in the West, you have events like Coachella. And in this events, you have pop artists who have been showing considerable amounts of skin for years. And nobody particularly treats it as a crisis in decency. Most Western artists actually have a lot of skin exposure and do a lot of provocative dances or provocative concepts. And so for me, Waterbomb just seems like one of the only opportunities for Korean pop artists to, be a little bit more daring when it comes to showing skin. I feel like it's their only comfort spot if they want to do so. And in many other shows and platforms, they don't really have that freedom. And so if anything, for me, the unusualness of this becomes the good thing about it because it's just an exception inside the Korean industry, is not the norm. And so if it's just a one-time chance once a year for the artists to do whatever they want and wear whatever they want, I fully support it. But I can also see how there's a problem of them probably being feeling a little bit forced to do so, or just having that type of pressure.
And I think now what's funny is that because that pressure was there, maybe it was because of that pressure, that unspoken pressure that was there. There was one artist that actually went viral for not showing any skin.
Oh,
She actually wore
right.
like
I
a
saw that.
bodysuit and
Yes.
a tight bodysuit, but like it didn't show any of her skin, and that actually got more attention.
Right.
So it's kind of interesting what this has led to.
That is very interesting.
So once again, we're seeing the same tension between individual freedom and public standards. While some see these performances as part of the festival experience, others question whether there should be limits, especially when the content can easily spread beyond the event itself. And we wanted to hear what our viewers think about this as well. So we asked on our channel, what do you think about revealing outfits and suggested performances at the Waterbomb Festival? And here's what the results showed. So the majority, 61%, said that they see it as a matter of freedom of expression, while 39% considered it inappropriate. So again, here we see another clear majority in favor of personal freedom, but this time there is a clear sentiment that the line between self-expression and going too far can look very different from person to person. So after looking at everything, we've looked at shirtless jogging to swimwear and festival performances, we've seen just how differently people can draw a line between personal freedom and indecent exposure. So after today's debate, where do you think we should draw a line on public exposure, Fabio?
That is such a hard question. And I think it was quite eye-opening to have this conversation today because I have also realized a lot of things about myself that I didn't really know.
Same here, yeah.
And I also changed a little bit my opinion on this topic because there's a lot of layers to this. And so even though I always support the freedom of expression and just you wanting to show off your body and your sense of style however you want, it's also true that there's a lot of hypocrisy in that statement too, because I do support the freedom that comes with it, but then again, that freedom is not necessarily real and tangible. Not everybody is allowed to do the same thing. People are different, and the perception is also different. What I'm essentially saying is that when you see someone who has a very fit, muscular, or conventionally attractive build, and they are going shirtless around Han River, you probably just ignore it. Just don't think anything special about it. But when you see a type that is not necessarily the ideal, or a body type that is just not that conventional, it definitely strikes your eyes, and that's when judgment starts for a lot of people. And I think that becomes a deeper problem rather than the exposure itself. And so I think that we are reacting to whether exposure should be allowed or not. But I think the layers behind that reveal a darker truth about the way that we think about people. I think we should focus on that topic a little bit more, maybe next time or on our own. But I still prefer to advocate for the freedom that comes with just, you know, releasing yourself however you need, especially when the weather is so hot, because let's be real, summer in Korea has been quite terrible so far. But I can also understand how a more conservative approach like the one that Hayur brought today can also be quite effective because it treats everybody equally. You know, when you say, okay, no swimsuit allowed, or for example, we are not going shirtless around Han River, everyone has to follow the same dress code. But when that doesn't exist, the judgment feels different.
That is so true. So sometimes having that set rule for everyone may be easier to follow.
Yes.
May be more fair.
It might feel more fair, yes.
Right. So what are your last thoughts on this?
Well, I think I love your points first, Fabio, and I also think that it's really hard to say what's right or wrong because everyone has a different level of comfort when it comes to revealing outfits, right?
Yes.
So I think what matters is dressing appropriately for the place and situation and being considerate of people around us. Of course, personal freedom is really important, but if the freedom makes other people uncomfortable, then I think we should be willing to find a middle ground.
Right. So we've really seen today that what feels acceptable to one person can make another uncomfortable. So ultimately, drawing the line between personal freedom and public comfort may come down to finding a social balance. And as summer heat continues to rise, perhaps the real question is not just how much we can bear, but how much we should share. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of New Generation. My Newsroom will be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Korea time with more stories and discussions. Big thanks to Fabio.
This was a fun topic.
It was, and also Hayur.
It was my pleasure.
And to our viewers, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you stay cool without getting too exposed, literally or otherwise. We are New
Generation.